When I get out of here, the first thing I'm going to do is eat a piece of fresh homemade bread slathered with butter and dripping with honey. It was Natalia who said that. Don't talk about food, said Xenia. I won't, said Ivanka. How can we talk about fresh bread or butter and honey when we're all so hungry? I wouldn't want to talk about the beautiful torts my mother would make, or soups with wild mushrooms my brother picked in his secret spot in the woods. My stomach grumbled with hunger. Can't we talk about something else? But try as we might, the conversation kept on coming back to food. I fell into sleep, dreaming of my grandmother's poppy seed cookies. With a blast of the early morning whistle, the next day began. Then the next, and the next, and the next. They all knitted together with sadness, hunger, and cold. We labored through March and April and into May. Each day was much like that first Monday. We would get up in the dark and work until it was practically dark again. 12 hours was usual, although there was a few who toiled longer. Every few days more laborers would arrive by train, yet it seemed that the camp always had room for more. On Saturdays we finished at noon, and Sundays, glorious Sunday, we usually had off. The higher class prisoners who didn't wear the OST badge were always to use the train and go into town on Saturday afternoons and Sundays. A few did housekeeping for German civilians and would be fed as payment. Oksana and Marta used the privilege of their P badges to go into town and sell items that we girls in Barrack 7 made in our off hours. Sculptures made of discarded wood with a sharpened spoon as a carving tool, or small bits of embroidery made with thread and fabric I stole from the laundry. The two girls would stand in the streets hawking our items. It was a dangerous thing to do, and money was worthless in the camps, but they could barter for a piece of lard or a chunk of horse meat, and these little bits kept the rest of us in Barrack 7 alive. In the summer months, farmers would wait outside of camp on Saturday afternoons with their trucks. They would take a few lucky souls with them to work in their fields. And since there was no roll call on Sunday mornings, those leaving on Saturday afternoon often wouldn't come back until Sunday night. Julie was one who would go, and so would Natalia. How I longed to tear off my OST badge and go with them. But it wasn't just the OST badge that was the problem. It was proper papers, and those I didn't have. From Julie, the same farmer picked her up each Saturday. She told me that Herr Klein and his wife despised Hitler and that they were kind and generous. They insisted that she eat at the table with them and their young daughter, and she was served as much food as if she were family. Julie told me that they had 2 sons in the German army, both fighting on the Eastern Front. That sent chills down my spine. The Eastern Front was Ukraine. Julie knew that if she was found smuggling food into the camp, she could be shot, but she took the chance when she could. Once she smuggled in a thick piece of real bread made out of rye flour. I wept for joy. Natalia didn't go with the same farmer each week. Most Saturdays she was paid in food, and she would share whatever she could. Once she smuggled back a handful of real coffee beans. Each of us in Barrack 7 got at least 1. I got 2. The burst of flavor when I chewed the beans was glorious. But then all night I tossed sleeplessly, wondering and worrying about Larissa. Had she been taken to a camp like this? How could she possibly prove herself useful? I had to work myself up into such a worried state by the morning whistle that I vowed never to eat another coffee bean, no matter how delicious they were. For brief moments, snatched on the weekends, Luca and I would sit together behind the girls' washroom and talk about life before the war. His father had been a pharmacist, but his store had been confiscated by the communists. In secret, Mr. Borukovich had continued to help the sick, and he began teaching Luca the art of making medicine. But our neighbor informed on him, said Luca. Tato was paraded through the streets as an enemy of the people. Some of those he had secretly helped came out to watch. Not that I blame them. I mean, what else could they do? He was sentenced to 10 years in Siberia. Where is he now? I asked. Still there as far as I know. Or dead, he sighed. Do you have any other family? Luca nodded slowly. My mother, she said. She might be alive somewhere in Germany. She was taken as a slave laborer before I was. I want this war to end, I told him. Then you can find your parents, and I can find my sister. Luca squeezed my hand. Until that time, let's watch out for each other. You will be like the sister I never had. His words warmed my soul. Often by the time the weekend came, I was so tired that all I could do was sleep. It was a way of briefly escaping the hunger and the cold and the sadness. But every once in a while on a Sunday morning, from 10 until 11, the Nazis would let us have a recital. And no matter how bone-weary I felt, I always went to listen. It was astonishing how many wonderful singers there were at our camp. Some people made crude instruments out of pieces of wood and string and metal. I would sit there and listen, and tears running down my face, and think of my mother's truth. The beauty could be found everywhere. Bare feet and a thin dress is not much to wear in a Bavarian winter. So the warmth of August made me thankful. On the coldest days, when we first arrived, I had considered tearing up one of my blankets and making it into warmer clothing, but our warden told us that we would be issued only those 2 blankets for the whole time we were here, and that could be years. We were not allowed to use them for clothing, and we were to guard them against theft. As Ingi got used to me, she no longer made me spend so much time doing the laundry. I got to sew most of the day, and even though the work needed to be done quickly as well, I was grateful for the clean job and thankful that I was proving myself indispensable. And as the days progressed, it wasn't just bedding and towels that I worked on. Ingi brought me her personal items too. So I darned knit socks, mended flannel nighties, and hemmed silken slips. For the officers, I mended woolen greatcoats and fur-lined hats. As the various kinds of fabric slipped through my fingers, I longed to have some of it for my friends and myself. Those socks would feel so good on my feet, and how wonderful it would be to have a clean dress to wear. One sticky September day, I got up my nerve and asked Ingi if I could wash my own dress in the laundry. Scrubbing it with stone and using the bleaching powder had worn it quite thin, and I was afraid that it would eventually fall apart. What would I do then? Her eyes widened in surprise at my request. If I could let you, I would, she said. But how could I get the lice and dirt from your clothing mix in with the laundry for Germans? But the soap here would wash it all away, I said. Who would know the difference? She shook her head slowly. If Officer Schmidt saw you in an outfit that was suspiciously clean, he would immediately know that I had allowed what I had allowed. I cannot risk it.